Welcome to the SMB Community Podcast, produced by the Small Biz Thoughts technology community, with your hosts, Amy Babinchak, James Kernan, and Carl Polachuk. We are dedicated to making every IT professional a successful IT professional. Welcome to a special edition of the SMB Community Podcast. I'm joined today by one of my employees, Dylan Dahlquist. So, lots of people have more than one job. All of my employees have more than one job. So obviously the most important job Dylan does is for me, but he owns his own business on the side. And one of the reasons that I brought him on board is his specialty with Google Adwords. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I think you'll be amazed at what kind of stuff you can do out there. So welcome, Dylan. Tell us, how did you get into this?
Okay, so I have a background that you're aware of in research science. Was actually where I started, and I started in research science with chemistry and doing a bunch of all kinds of weird science projects. And at one point I realized that I just didn't want to do that anymore, but I still liked the complexity of the work. Mm-hmm. But what I found was that I really enjoyed was communicating these complex ideas. And so to get into communications, I turned to marketing, because marketing is the business of communicating ideas just for profit. And I got into Google Ads because when I had some meetings with some local CEOs in Sacramento, I was starting in social media marketing, because if you do not have a degree in marketing, that's kind of where you start. Because anybody can start up in social media marketing. That's why it's such a heavily impacted industry. So I was talking with one of the marketing CEOs here in Sacramento, and he was the one who told me, forget social media marketing, go into Google Adwords, because
it's the only thing that matters.
It's the only thing that matters. And if I'm having a conversation with you about your business and you ask me the very reasonable question, how much business have you brought me? How much have you increased my revenue? If I'm a social media marketer, that's a very difficult question.
Right. It says, well, I'm giving you exposure. Well, how much exposure? $1,200 a month exposure? $1,000 a month exposure?
And even with the exposure, if you're just purely social media marketing, meaning you are managing Facebook, LinkedIn accounts and stuff like that, it's hard to even measure exposure, because there's going to be people that look at it and then you don't get to track that metric. You get likes and comments.
Well, there's also online tools that you can subscribe to.
Exactly.
Well, you can look up what your score is, and they'll say, oh yeah, I have a score maybe of C+ on Facebook. Well, yeah. Trust me, I have a pretty good engaged audience on Facebook, so I don't know what they're measuring, but it's not the real world.
It's not the real world, and it's somebody else's metric. And well, I think we've spent enough time downplaying social media marketing, but it does have uses. But the thing is Google Ads and digital advertising, you can prove your ROI so much better.
So we will get back to that, because as you know, my biggest frustration is trying to get that last little connection.
Right.
And we do lots of we get really, really close. We just don't quite get to 100%.
Of course.
So Dylan's business includes a heavy focus on nonprofits. And it was interesting to me, as you all know, I'm a big fan of the 3-tiered price list. His tiers are different than your tiers, and they're worth considering. So why don't you tell us kind of how you make money not charging people for nonprofit advertising?
Well, I operate solely on exposure. No. So nonprofits, they can apply for a thing called a Google Ad Grant. Now, a Google Ad grant gives them a large amount of monthly advertising and a large amount of a tax write-off for Google.
Right.
There's a lot of stipulations as to which nonprofits can apply for it. And then once you have it, they have all these stipulations of you have to have a certain number of conversions, you have to be performing at a certain level, you have to, well, there's a lot of policy.
Right. Yeah, you can only use certain wording. And,
of course.
right.
And so a lot of these nonprofits, they see the amount of money that they get per month with this grant, and they're overjoyed.
Right. Woo-hoo.
They're like, oh my God, we're saved. And then they set up their first little like smart account, a smart ad. And over the period of like 3 months, it's spent like $150 over like these thousands of dollars that they could be tapping into.
So they can't figure out how to spend the money because they can't figure out how to put the ads together in the campaigns.
Right. And it's part of like Google's best interest to keep that complex.
And just so we're clear, so 99% of them, their call to action is give us money.
Yeah.
Right. So these are ads a non-for-profit puts out on Google, and then they get people to contribute to their worthy cause.
Right. So they get more signups for their various events. They literally get more donations.
Right. So then you come in and say, I can fix that.
Yes, I can go into your account. I can look at your website, look at your cause, figure out your narrative, and we're going to optimize that ad grant account and actually get all of the money that you've been allocated.
Right. So they love it, and then they fire you.
They're like, this is so wonderful. Goodbye.
Exactly. I mean, they take it in-house. They say, oh, yeah, now thanks for getting that going. We appreciate you working for free. Now we're going to do it ourselves. And then what happens?
Then what I was talking about earlier with like, oh, you have to have a certain performance metric. You have to have this. All of the policy issues come in. And those policies will change every few months. As like just today, there was a new update to Google Ads that changed their user interface. It's constantly changing.
Right.
And so I keep on top of all of those changes. And the thing is too, is like, there is such a thing as ad burnout, where people have seen the same ads over and over again, and they just kind of stop clicking, your performance drops. So they either experience one of two things. They either experience that ad burnout, and the performance they were seeing before slowly starts to drip off, and then they start to experience the second thing. They go in, they're like, oh, well, it can't be that hard. I'll just make an ad myself.
Right.
And then they don't make the ad correctly as in line with the policies of their grant, and Google comes in and says, hey, you're not within policies, and they put a suspension on their account.
So their compliance deteriorates over time.
Yes.
Just it naturally does.
Mm-hmm.
Policies come in, ads get old.
Yeah.
And so forth. Okay.
Father time kind of comes in rather quickly.
So then you start making money.
Well, then I say, it's like, okay, well, you can bring me on as an account manager, and you don't have to, you just tell me your goals of like, oh, we'd like more donations, or what we're really interested in is this event coming up, and we want to get more signups for that. That's all you need to tell me. And then I make the account do that.
And so at that point, you are charging them for your services.
Right. Because then I'm brought on as an account manager and as a kind of a consultant, and then they get to reach out to me, and I'm just their point of contact to make their account.
So what I loved about this, the first time he told me about it, is that it starts out with, I'm going to give you free services because I'm a nice guy, which follows one of the absolute fundamental rules of any, including social media,
Mm-hmm.
of marketing, which is show value first. And then people say, oh, I can do this myself. And they have to learn for themselves that they actually can't do it themselves. And then they invite Dylan back in, and he fixes them up. So let's talk about your 3-tiered pricing list.
Okay, so I have 3 simple tiers where my bottom tier is that volunteer work where I'm doing this for free, and I do that in the hopes of they're going to convert later down the road, and also just, out of my own goodwill. I work with a lot of worthy causes. And then the top 2 tiers I have as my first priority clients and my second priority clients.
So basically, if you're in a hurry, you pay more.
Exactly. If you're saying, I had one client they were a volunteer client, and they were saying, well, I gave them my timelines of they're like, okay, well, how long until we get ads running? And I'm like, okay, here are the timelines. First, I have to do a general assessment. Then I'll put up the structure of your account. This is how long this is going to take. And they're like, and then they tell me, well, we have this event coming up in April and we need signups by then. So that's totally fine. Here are my prices for higher priority clients.
And your prices are monthly.
Monthly, yes.
So it's goal oriented, and it's a monthly flat fee.
Yes.
So you will get their promotions up, and you'll make sure that they're compliant, that their money is flowing to them from Google.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of not, I don't want to call it fake money, but it's donated money that can only be used for advertising.
Yes.
So they've got this sort of advertising budget, and then money flows in from contributions.
Mm-hmm.
So cool. All right. So I like the business model. I like the strategy. I like the fact that, I mean, you've told me, if somebody comes back to me and says, we really, really, really don't have any money, you'll say, okay, I do have 3 hours available, but not today.
Yeah.
Not tomorrow.
A lot of those it's volunteer timelines are pretty long because I'm very busy.
Right.
And I will totally help. A lot of these are very, like I said, very worthy causes that I would love to help. And so that's why I even offer the second priority clients, because those are I was like, okay, if you don't have that much of a budget, here is a pricing option.
Right. You can get something. So maybe top tier gets it immediately, and second tier, it might be in 3 or 4 days, and then bottom tier is next week. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. So then I want to talk about, and I think everybody who listens regularly will enjoy this part. Dylan has helped me. I've probably been doing Google ads, I don't know, maybe 10 years, 7 years, something like that, a long, long time. And over the years, I've taken Google's advice on setting things up, and they have automated advice. And then once you start spending enough money, then they give you a number, and you can call, and you can talk to a consultant who says, oh no, ignore all of that free advice that the automated system gave you. Stop adding all those keywords. Stop doing all of this and that. Put in your negative keywords, dial in your audience, and they start helping you. So Dylan is Google certified, Google Ads certified.
Yes.
And you refresh that from
Yearly.
time to time. Yeah, annually. Okay.
Yeah.
So, he actually knows what's going on the inside. So he looked at my account, and he didn't really laugh out loud to me publicly, but he did say, we could easily improve the performance here, dialing in the keywords, dialing in the audience, splitting it up, doing lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have campaigns where we literally track, we were just looking at stats week by week. What did we spend, and what kind of performance or interaction did we get? I think one of the big things we did to speed up our websites was to stop letting Google Ads interact with our websites.
Yeah, we limited that. We compartmentalized it using a tool.
So what happens is when you get certain things going on, if you watch how pages load, and there are tools you can use to see how fast they load, you'll see a lot of your performance drag is Google Ads slowing down your pages, which just creates a higher bounce rate. Right?
It does. And you have to be careful because there are certain tracking components that purposely slow down things so that they can make sure that everything is loaded and it can read all of it before
Right.
it loads the next thing. Yeah, that's there are cases that you may want that, but not most of the time.
So then we have a call to action. So for everything that we do, there's something. So if you're a managed service provider, your call to action is probably going to be get the free report, contact our salespeople for an appointment, schedule a network assessment, or something like that. So your call to action is going to be something where you can literally have a page where people fill out a form to request something or whatever. So the conversion tracking in Google Ads is fairly straightforward because you can look up and correct me if I'm wrong, but so it's in Google Analytics where we start tracking like, oh, when this page shows up, we consider that a valid conversion.
We don't actually need Google Analytics for that part.
So that's Google Ads.
That's Google Ads through the use of a tool that I use of Google Tag Manager.
Okay. So Google Tag Manager allows you to do that. And then, so then you just work backwards from there. Okay. So let's say somebody visits your website and then 3 months later, they go back and they fill out that form. If the original visit came from a Google ad within, say, 30 days,
yes,
it's considered a conversion.
You can extend or shorten that. You can customize how long since they've interacted with an ad do you consider that interaction to that ad a conversion.
So it's never perfect, but you can see that, over time, you have an increase in people clicking on the ad because you fine-tuned the ad, fine-tuned the marketing, fine-tuned the audience, right? Fine-tune the keywords.
That's a whole nother beast.
Yeah. All of those things have to be done. And then you could say, okay, and then that leads to so many conversions. So the thing that I found most interesting for what we do is, again, we can never be perfect, but we can actually do pretty good at dialing in because I control the store and I control the forms and I control the website. We can dial in a lot of the stats and see, okay, somebody clicked here and then they did this and then they did that and then they sat on the sidelines for a week and then they came back and bought. And so it's really dramatically improved our analytical ability as well as our sales.
Most importantly.
Yeah, most importantly. So anyway, so when you look at something like that, how can people get started themselves, or do they just have to hire you or hire
they have to hire me and they have to pay me so much money? No, there's a few ways. I mean, there's plenty of online tools if you really. The thing is at the end of the day, it's not, I mean, it is still a complex process, but it's not the most complex process. And there's lots of ad agencies that are making videos and putting information out there because they want you to convert to them.
Right. Well, and just a note on that. So I've mentioned many, many times to Dylan, Google Ads will happily take all of your money and give you nothing in return. And it occurs to me the same is true with most ad agencies.
Oh yeah.
They will say, hey, so what do you charge? Oh, and some of them are $7,500 a month and the guarantee is zero, not one thing.
I saw one recently that their pricing model was just 15% of your ad spend.
Wow.
Not even of like what you earn.
See, what's funny is if you could guarantee me revenue, if I could say that, I had, 6 people sign contracts because of this, I'd give you 10% of the setup fee, just cause, because there's, that's pay for performance instead of pay for click.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people have this experience of having paid somebody to help them with Google Ads. And then again, they try to do it in-house. Yeah. And it's not any easier for a commercial enterprise than it is for a non-for-profit.
And yeah, I mean, it's the same animal, except for, I've told you about how I feel like it's harder for a nonprofit going through this grant because you have all of these policy compliances to look out for. And And then they send you these big scary emails of, your account is in non-compliance and it's going to be shut down. It's never going to be shut down. It's always only going to be paused, and then you change it and then it was reactivated immediately.
Well, and then the other thing is that you still have to follow guidelines, and
yes. We were just talking about that.
Kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's a half-time job, but Dylan spends a huge amount of time creating ads and then convincing Google that according to their own policies, these ads are okay.
Oh yeah.
So what kind of things make an ad get rejected? Because when I used to have them rejected, I would just like delete them and go write a different ad.
Which I've seen online is a legitimate advertising strategy, is just deleting it and trying it again, which I feel like is the IT equivalent of turn it off and turn it back on.
Right, exactly.
And it's like, great, we have no idea what went wrong.
Are these automated processes, or are human beings looking at them?
No, it's always going to be Google's automatic robot. It's triggered something, and it's funny because I feel like that automated robot is gunning for my job.
Right. And Google has a bias against IT service providers. They're all considered to be fake spammers, trying to steal people's money, and it's really hard to get some of these ads approved.
Well, it's with IT. I've also had ridiculous situations with some of my nonprofit clients. Like, I had one that's an animal shelter. And this animal shelter was running ads for adopting animals. And we got a strike, hey, this is a limited approval on your ads. Like, you're getting close to the wire because your ad is about abortion.
Wow.
And I was like, no, it's not. I looked at the ad. I tried to look at the back end of the site. I'm like, is there any weird thing here? Nothing. But the word adoption was there, which is super close. And so I contacted, and I went back and forth. A lot of the work that I do for these nonprofits is kind of just going toe to toe with Google.
Right.
And
it's AI versus human beings.
Yes. And so I go to Google. I've gone up their chain of command quite a few times to get somebody that has the power to just overrule. And that's what happens. And that's what happened with that is I contacted them and I was like, look, there's nothing in here. And the first message they sent back was like, oh, look at that. It's fixed. There's never there. It's performing normally. It's like, you better be right.
It's just like, I remember every time I would have a problem with Pacific Bell, I'd call and say, hey, your internet's having a problem. They would say, just a minute. Nope, we checked. There's no problem here. And then I look and it's all back online.
Oh, look at that.
Somebody rebooted a router.
Definitely the squeaky wheel.
So you help with that, getting the ads actually approved. And then the other thing, and to be honest, I don't know how you have the time to do this. I always knew just, the thing I have to do is A/B testing, right? Change one word, change another word, and I can write 12 ads that are almost identical.
Right.
But you also will change the color of the background or change the graphic and have identical ads with a different color, a different background, and then see which one works. And, that is huge. And that's something that a business owner, you're just never going to have the time to do that.
Oh, no, that is a time consuming process because it's more of a creative process because I have to think, okay, that's more of the old school marketing of just okay, let's look at our target audience. What kind of messaging do we want to do? It's the same kind of marketing that you would have done in a newspaper, way back when that was the medium to advertise. And that's when I was getting started in this, I did not immediately go to Google Ads or go to the bells and whistles, the final thing. I started my journey by learning the fundamentals of old school marketing and sales. The things that are going to be there when all of the electronics turn off, right? The tried and true principles. And So when I'm going through and I'm designing new ads and new ad campaigns and trying different angles and kind of doing A, B, C, D, E, F testing, I'm doing a kind of lengthy process of trying to figure out, let's try some radically different kind of messaging so that we can really, which was something I picked up when I was doing research science. I had this one PI, like the leader of the laboratory. She was the professor there. And I was doing these month-long experiments, and I would change the variable a little bit each time. Just a little bit here, a little bit there. And she got very fed up with me. And she was like, radically change it by huge amounts and then figure out the trends from there. And I realized that I was making too small of changes each time. And so I use that same guiding principle when we're making advertisements, is because we are launching an experiment of sorts. We don't really know, but I'm going off of my best.
So it'd be like you create ads, one on each end of the spectrum.
Yes.
And then you start, okay, now let's create one in the middle, and then let's,
and dial it in.
Yeah. And we have many, many times. So I don't know if you'll meet with everybody as frequently as we meet, but
well, if they pay. Goes back to that priority tier.
For enough money. But so we dial it in, but we don't always make changes. We very frequently will say, let that budget sit until it's a month old.
Yes.
Until we actually know that because sometimes, what you're tempted to do is to say, that looks like it works, crank it up, let's go, make $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
But if what you're seeing is some weird anomaly because there's 1 billion variables and you control 6 of them. Right?
Exactly.
So you can't just see a small trend and then crank it up. You have to see a long-term trend and then start spending more money and more money. There's also a cap of how much money makes sense to spend.
Right.
So what do you think is the minimum? Like if an IT service provider is setting a budget, do you have to spend $100 a week, $1,000 a week?
Well, that is a question I get very frequently, and very frequently stumps me because I never can give them, this much.
So there is no good answer.
And if somebody's saying this much right there, I would be very cautious of that person because it sounds like they're a very good salesman.
Well, and so you're not taking any piece of the action, right? So
right. So we negotiate my compensation outside of
right.
that.
So your only goal is you need the performance to be good enough so that I continue to pay you every month.
Exactly.
So it's not like, I need you to spend more because I'm going to make more.
Right. I take a much more personal interaction with my clients rather than just viewing them purely as a resource.
Right. So if people are promoting, and you may not have an answer for this, but if people are promoting their services, do you have any idea if it would be better for an IT service provider to be promoting a product, say, hey, we have the best price on backup and disaster recovery versus a free network assessment?
Right. I will say something is this isn't a flat, I can't really give that number because it varies quite a bit, but this is my guiding philosophy on pricing that, which is lower involvement purchases you can get away with a smaller budget. And then higher involvement purchases are going to require more of a budget.
Higher involvement from you or the client?
The client. So it's like...
so if I'm going to commit to a managed service contract,
yes,
that's going to be a more expensive sell.
Yes.
But then hopefully I'm going to get a client that is going to pay me $2,000 a month.
Exactly.
So so that my cost of acquisition can certainly be above $1.
Right. And it's like when you're dealing with, if you're looking at it from your clients, your audience that's going to be converting into bringing business for you, not for me, but for you, when they have to spend, when it's at a higher price point for them, they're going to need more convincing in order to actually make that purchase.
Right.
And so if you pay me, a couple of pennies a day to like run a couple ads and you go, well, no one's converting. This is terrible, Dylan. Then it's the same thing like going to like some major magazine and purchasing, a little classified ad at the and you're like
a 1-inch ad in the corner that you run once.
Yes, that you run once, and you're like, well, we got nothing from that. We're not going to buy a full page. Like it's the exact same kind of principle.
Cool. All right. So sadly, we're out of time. But here's the deal. I want anybody who's got questions about Google Ads and so forth, go ahead and put them in the comments down below. Put them in an email to me, or you can send an email to Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
What's your email?
My business email, I shortened my last name because it's a long thing for
Dahlquist.
Yes, it's a whole thing. So I go by Dylan, Dylan, Quest, digital@gmail.com.
Dylan Quest Digital.
Yes.
At Gmail. All right. So send in questions, because I would like to have Dylan back another time and talk, because there's so many details you can't even imagine of what we've gone through. A lot of A/B testing. I work hard to have Kara and Ruben create landing pages that work, but then Dylan allows us to do A/B testing. We'll literally divide the traffic between 2 web pages and see what comes out of that. So
yeah, we've done some great just isolating out a lot of variables so that we can really get a clear answer.
Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And I'll pay you for it anyway, so it doesn't really matter whether I appreciate it or not. Anyway, this has been another SMB Community Podcast. Please, if you like it, give it a thumbs up, like it on iTunes, all that happy stuff. Share it with your friends, and we will see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to the SMB Community Podcast. If you found this useful, interesting, or fun, please subscribe, share with your friends, and give us a thumbs up on your favorite social media. Please check out the show notes at smbcommunitypodcast.com and give us your feedback.